I want to get us back to having that conversation and having that conversation so that we can get to the point where we establish or reestablish medical autonomy as a societal principle, a basic fundamental human right, and then codify that in law so that it can never be contravened again. So that's where I'm coming from. And that's why I started Health Freedom Defense Fund, was to get us back to that place.
Ready to live at the higher vibrations, where peace, love, joy, and good health are the daily standard? That's what this show is all about. Welcome to Vibe. And here's your host, Robin Openshaw.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vibe Show. I'm your host, Robin Openshaw, and I'm very excited to bring you a repeat guest we maybe talked to last in 2021. She's been a total warrior for health freedom and runs a nonprofit and has sued and won. And so I want to get that backstory on what has happened we'll have her tell you what her nonprofit is, what they've accomplished the last 4 years. But what brings me back to her today is that the state of Idaho, where she lives, she was a big part of getting through the strongest health freedom bill in America. Of course, we all want to be part of making sure that that kind of thing happens in our state too. So welcome to the Vibe Show, Leslie Manookian.
So great to be back with you, Robin.
So your nonprofit, how many attorneys working for it, some of your wins, tell us about that.
Yeah. So people may remember that I actually made a documentary film on vaccines, an award-winning documentary called The Greater Good. And that came out in 2011. And I started researching it in probably 2001 is when I first even heard that there was a vaccine debate. I had no idea up until that point. I thought that they were like, drinking a glass of water, that there was zero downside and that they were the greatest invention of mankind. And I didn't have any reason to question that. But once I started digging in, I actually went to homeopathy school. I was working on Wall Street in finance, and I started studying homeopathy on the side. And I heard about the vaccine controversy, and that spurred me to do 20 years of research. And so when 2020 unfolded, and to make the movie in there, The Greater Good, which came out in 2011. And what happened was in 2020, I woke up and I heard that there was some new virus coming out of China. And I said to my husband, oh my gosh, what I've been fearing for 20 years is finally happening. They're going to use this as a public health scare to mandate vaccines and implement travel restrictions and all sorts of things. And he said, oh, come on, that's not going to happen. I'm like, yes, it is. So some of my longtime supporters said you should start a nonprofit, and I did, and that's Health Freedom Defense Fund. So Health Freedom Defense Fund was founded in 2020, and we were one of the first organizations to start challenging vaccine COVID shot mandates. Our first case was in March of 2021 against the Los Angeles Unified School District. And the day after we filed our case, challenging their mandate of the shot, the EUA shot, emergency use authorized shot, they rescinded their mandate the very next day. And they said, it was just not really a mandate. It was more of a recommendation and people can test instead. And then long story short, we worked our way through the court. They lied to the court and told the court that they did not intend to have a mandate. They were not drafting one. They had no intentions of implementing a mandate, and the court dismissed the case. And 17 days later, they issued a new mandate. So we sued them again a second time. And that case is still alive in the courts, but we have smacked them down. They had to stop their mandate again a second time because of our lawsuit. And that case is huge because have you heard of the lawsuit called Jacobson versus Massachusetts from 1905?
Yep.
So this is a Supreme Court case regarding a pastor named Jacobson who didn't want to get the smallpox vaccine in the early 20th century because he'd been injured by it when he was a boy in Scandinavia. And so I can't remember, I think he was Swedish, but he's living in Massachusetts, in Cambridge, and they implement a mandate for smallpox vaccines. He says no. And they say, well, okay, you don't have to take it, but you have to pay a fine, $5. And he's like, I'm not paying the fine. And so that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And he was ordered ultimately to pay the fine. He was not ordered to take the shot. Irrespective of that, Jacobson has been used now for 120 years to justify vaccine mandates. And our second case against the Los Angeles Unified School District is the first case that's ever put a dent in Jacobson. So we went to, our second case was dismissed by the same court in Los Angeles, saying, well, Jacobson applies. And so the state has a vested interest in an irrational basis in mandating the shot. And we said, no, that's not correct. Jacobson was misapplied. These shots don't stop transmission or infection. Everybody knows that. And therefore, they must be a private medical matter. And Jacobson doesn't apply. And that went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and we won. And then the school district petitioned for a review of that. And just in March, we had oral argument in front of 11 judges of the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, and it went really, really well for us. So we are very, very eager to see what the court is going to rule. But basically, this is another huge case we've done, which is trying to really change the law, to basically get the courts to update Jacobson, because Jacobson is, one, out of date, and two, there's a bunch of conflicting case law from the Supreme Court in the last 50 or 60 years, which has found that we have the right to make our own medical decisions, the right to refuse unwanted medical interventions, even those that might save our lives, because we have a liberty interest in making those decisions. Our case is pushing for there to be a rectification, a reconciliation between those cases. So that's a huge case. And then the one that everybody will know about, Robin, is we sued the federal government, the CDC, and the Biden administration over the mask mandate, the federal travel mask mandate. And we were successful in taking down the federal travel mask mandate in April of 2022. So no more masks on planes, trains, and automobiles, essentially, after our case. So that's the kind of work we've been doing. But then this year, actually for the last year we've been working on changing the law surrounding mandates in general. So I'm sure you know this. The Constitution reserves health rights as part of the police powers to the states. And that's why CDC can only implement a recommended vaccine schedule, not any vaccine mandates. And that's how we won on the mask case, essentially. So state laws describe what vaccines may or may not be mandated, not federal laws. And all these people who are clamoring for there to be some kind of a federal solution to some of these problems, I think, are barking up the wrong tree. Because had our laws been that that the federal government could issue these kinds of mandates, we would have been no different than Canada or Australia or Britain in the last 5 years. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want that. Right? They were crazy how they went. And it's because they had the power and the authority to issue a mandate on a national basis. And that is something that our forefathers gifted us with. 50 states that can chart their own courses. So having witnessed the atrocities, essentially, and I believe they are atrocities, people killed themselves over these mandates. People were killed by the mandates. I have a dear friend who was paralyzed from the diaphragm down from the COVID shot.
Much larger number of people whose quality of life has been destroyed. And they're still breathing, but not a life I'd want. No,
listen, over 12,000 people, Robin, in the little state of Idaho with 2 million people, we just broke 2 million, over 12,000 people have reported vaccine injuries and death to the vaccine adverse events reporting system.
And that's, of course, the people who actually reported it. When my son was injured in and out of ERs and doctor's visits and 5 courses of steroids and failure to thrive, fell below the 5th percentile for weight. I'm 4 years mostly in bed from a flu vaccine. Neither one of us were ever reported to any database. I didn't know there was such a thing. I didn't even tell a doctor that I connected to the vaccine. I had no idea I had any rights whatsoever. Well, I really kind of didn't. But I mean, what did the Harvard Pilgrim study that found it's less than 1% of adverse events are even reported. So 12,000 that are reported, shall we times that by 100?
Even if you do it by 10, And I don't even know. So I think that the fewer than 1% applies before COVID, because I think a lot of people heard about VAERS during COVID.
Yeah.
More than people didn't have any clue about it before 2020. Like, until the COVID circus, no one knew what VAERS was unless you were deep in the vaccine safety awareness arena. You just wouldn't have any idea. And so I think that the number is definitely smaller than 1%, or that it used to be fewer than 1%. I'm sure it's much, much higher than that today for COVID shots. And that's because of all of the awareness that people have. The point is, it's definitely more than 12,000, which is a big number in a state with only 2 million people. Even if it's just multiply that by 10, 120,000. That's giant. That's 5% of the Idaho population.
Yeah, everyone listening to this probably knows somebody who they feel like they watched them be injured by the vaccine, and that person themselves. In my life, I mean, my husband and I are both from huge families. We probably have 7 or 8 known clear injuries, and only half of the people who are injured acknowledge that and will talk about it and say, "Well, I really wish I hadn't done that." Yeah. Well, and one of them is dead now. So
do the ones that don't, I mean, I bet a lot of people don't in your family, even if they have an injury, they don't even know, like they're not aware. They don't connect the dots, right? They haven't done enough research, and they're still kind of in their either echo chamber or denial phase, that they don't actually even see that that's what happened to them. Is that?
And not one is reported to VAERS. In fact, my husband has 4 sisters who are nurses, and they all got the vaccines. And the one who is clearly injured, knows she's injured, couldn't use the arm that was injected for a couple of years, and she needs that arm to inject women who are pregnant and help assist an OBGYN. I asked her, I had her over to my house for dinner, and I said, "Have you reported yourself to VAERS? I mean, she's a healthcare worker, she could do it." And she looked at me kind of like she knew that she was supposed to know something about what that was, but she didn't. And so she said, "No, because I couldn't prove it." And I just let it go, because this is literally like a year and a half, 2 years later, because you don't have to prove it to report it. Like, it's the canary in the coal mine.
The whole point is to report it so that it can be, they can gather all that information and then investigate whether there is some kind of temporal association, whether there might be some indicator of a correlation, right? It's not a proof. It's not causality. It helps them to understand what might be happening, so they can then go and ascertain whether or not there's some cause and effect. And so it's actually, what's really sad is that it's a super onerous system. Reporting to VAERS is very, very timely. And so most healthcare people do not use it. They don't realize that they are required to use it by federal law, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. And what happens is, if you're working on it and it takes so long, it can take 45 minutes to an hour, and you don't finish, it times you out. You can't save it and then come back to it. So then they just don't do it. And so I mean, my guess is that the number of Idahoans is a lot higher than 120,000, which would be 10 times the 12,000 that have reported, which is a lot. And what it means is that everybody knows somebody. And that has really been to our benefit, because what I've been working on for the last year plus is to get a law passed that protects everyone's medical freedom. And we just did it about a week ago.
We're super excited for you. We just want to thank you for those other court wins that I know that tons of your blood, sweat, and tears went into that. And you have to go raise funds, which is probably not what you would like to spend your time doing, but must be done. So what brings us here today is, tell us about the law in Idaho. When I was in Utah in 2020, maybe that's where I interviewed you from. 2020, I was in Utah. End of the year, moved here to Florida. Basically was, getting calls from the FBI. We stood out in front of the governor's mansion for 3 weeks straight. I ran 12 huge protests. So I just came to Florida thinking everything would be better here. The only thing that's better here is, the weather, but is the governor. And you had a governor who wasn't a big fan of either, and you still have him. Didn't he veto the bill after it cleared both houses the first time? So tell us the whole story. Tell us what the bill is, what it accomplished, how'd you get through Brian Kemp or whatever his name is,
Brad Little.
Finally,
Brad Little.
Brad Little, that's his name. That's Georgia's governor. Yeah, what am I thinking?
Who has something on his back right now? They've passed, the Georgia legislature has passed a bill that would give a liability shield to pesticide manufacturers, at least to Bayer and Monsanto. I don't know if it's all. And it's on his desk to decide whether or not to veto it. If he does, talk about a traitor. How grotesque would that be? It would be just like the liability shield essentially for the vaccine makers.
We have the same bill. Our legislative session starts later, but we have that same bill in front of our legislature. So it's not yet on the governor's desk, but we have that same bill.
Well, the Idaho legislature killed it last year 3 times, and they wouldn't even give it a hearing this year. So that makes me happy. So let me just say, as a kind of prelude to this discussion, that the reason that I started Health Freedom Defense Fund was because I knew where this was headed. I knew that they were going to try and justify this, authoritarian response to a public health crisis emergency and get people to accept that they no longer were able to decide what medical interventions they needed or would submit to, and that they would make it very, very difficult. Remember, we know they've said we're going to squeeze them out. We're going to make their lives so miserable that they will actually do it, that they will take the shot. They did all these things. And I knew that was going to happen because they've been actually preparing for this for decades and had put in place all different pieces of legislation which facilitated this authoritarian overreach. And so when I founded Health Freedom Defense Fund, my whole goal was to have a national conversation in which we discussed and really came to a place where we acknowledged that the right to medical freedom, to bodily autonomy, is the most fundamental and basic of human rights. And that we never, ever sacrifice one human being in service to the theoretical greater good, right? I don't know how it's possible to see it any other way. There should be no Doug Camerons. Doug Cameron shouldn't be sitting in a wheelchair paralyzed from the diaphragm down because his boss wanted him to get the shot. That's just sick. And the boss wanted him to get the shot to protect the boss, and the boss is now dead and gone, and Doug is in a wheelchair for life. That's just heartbreaking. He's a dear friend, So this kind of thing shouldn't be happening. And when we think about society is made up of individuals. And, if you read philosophy from the 17th and 18th centuries, there were all sorts of debates between Immanuel Kant and of Germany, and then some of the others who are, I'm failing to recall right now, but those who espoused a utilitarian ethic and those who believed in the primacy of the individual. And I thought utilitarianism was, put to rest under the Nuremberg Code when we said that we don't ever experiment on human beings, that the ethical principle of informed consent must be met in every single medical intervention. But we've strayed so far from that. And so I want to get us back to having that conversation so that we can get to the point where we establish or reestablish medical autonomy as a societal principle, a basic fundamental human right, and then codify that in law so that it can never be contravened again. So that's where I'm coming from. And that's why I started Health Freedom Defense Fund, was to get us back to that place. And this bill that we just got passed and signed into law about 10 days ago now in Idaho is the first major step in that direction. It's called the Idaho Medical Freedom Act, and it assures that essentially almost no Idahoan can be forced into taking a medical intervention of any kind, or using a medical intervention like a mask in order to participate in normal life. So it means that no state entities, no businesses, no schools, no service providers of any kind can condition your employment or your access or use of services or transportation on you submitting to their desires. No medical mandates anymore.
Okay, so what didn't get through Governor Little's desk, and then what did you have to give up or change to get it through?
Yeah. So just so everybody's clear, that's huge. There is no state in the nation that has anything like that, right? That you cannot be forced to undergo any kind of a medical intervention in order to live a normal life. No vaccine papers, no masks, no forcing anybody to do anything, no sticking, swabs up people's noses into their cranium, none of this stuff. It's gone now. And it's gone for good. So in Idaho, so what happened was I wrote the bill last summer, and I worked together with a senator named Senator Dan Foreman. And I, had a meeting with him probably in July of last year via telephone, and told him what my idea was. And he was very excited about it. And so he said, write the bill, send it to me. And if I like it, then I'll run with it. Well, in doing my research, I found that there was actually a bill introduced in Idaho in 2023. Actually, it was introduced first in 2022, and then it was finally passed in 2023, and it was called the Coronavirus Stop Act. And this bill banned not only state, but private businesses and educational institutions, daycares, from requiring a COVID shot to an employee, staff member, or a customer or a student or anything like that. So it banned any kind of mandate for coronavirus shots in the state of Idaho. And I thought, well,
it was specific to coronavirus.
And only to coronavirus. But my reasoning on it was, well, if I take this as a template and I expand it and start increasing definitions and making it more comprehensive and applicable to every kind of medical intervention, then it would actually enshrine once and for all medical freedom. And that's where I really wanted to go. And I thought, well, we've got all the kind of workings that are really good that have already been passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. Why should any medical intervention be any different? And so I took the bill and I expanded it. I worked on all the definitions and everything. I sent it to the senator, and he said he loved it. And he took it to what's called the Legislative Services Office in Idaho. And they have attorneys and people who are experts at reviewing bills to make sure that the language is consistent with existing code and things like that. And they approved it, and we got the bill printed in January of this year. And he then asked me to come to Boise, which is about 3 hours from where I live, and to actually present the bill. And so I had the honor and the privilege of actually presenting the bill to the Idaho Senate State Affairs Committee on February 5th of this year. And so I presented the bill and then stood for questions, and they voted on it, and it made it out of committee with a couple of minor amendments requested, and those were made. And then it was voted on by the whole Senate, and it passed the whole Senate, and then it was sent to the Idaho House. And the Idaho House, I went and I presented again to the House Health and Welfare Committee and stood for questions. And I was grilled, absolutely grilled, but it was okay. It passed out of committee in a very strong vote. I mean, I think it was like 8-2 or 3 or 9 it was like amazing. And then it went to the whole floor of the House, and it passed the House 47-23.
So, oh, wow. That's a big win. So don't you have like a super majority where you can just skip the governor? Did you almost have that? Or that's not what you had to do, because your Governor Little actually did sign it, right?
Well, he vetoed it first. So here's what happened. So we basically make it through the House, and in the House we had a super majority. In the Senate, we did not. We were not quite there. We were a few votes shy. We thought we could get there, but basically what happened was the bill was sent to the governor's office. He did not get it until Monday, the 31st of March at 11:30 in the morning, which I thought was a little interesting, because I thought he should have gotten it on the Friday, the week before, but that's when he got it. And that's important because the session ended, or he thought the session was going to end that week, which would have been April 3rd, I think. Yeah. In Idaho, the governor has 5 days. If he does nothing, if he doesn't veto, and if he doesn't sign, the bill automatically becomes law 5 days later. So he got it at 11:30 in the morning on Monday, March 31st. He had until Friday, the 4th. No, that's wrong. It was the Monday before. I'm sorry. It's a blur, but basically he had 5 days to sign it, and he had until the Saturday, the 27th or 28th of March to sign it. I think it was the 29th is when he had it, that Saturday. So he had until that morning at 11:30. And the only bill that he vetoed of the entire session was the first bill, Senate Bill 1023. And he vetoed it when it would have taken effect in an hour or an hour and a half, literally less than an hour and a half before it was going to take effect. He vetoed the bill. And he issued a statement along with it why he was vetoing the bill. In the statement, he said that the reason he was vetoing the bill is because he thought that it infringed parental rights to send their kids to a safe place because sick children couldn't be sent home. Robin, that was a total fabrication because nothing in the bill contravened existing code. And so I conferred with the senator over the weekend, and he said he was going to work with the Senate, and in the morning, on Monday morning, he was going to go in and add the appropriate language in order to reassure the governor. And they were going to take a straw poll and see if they were going to work with all the senators, see if they could get the senators to come over and make sure that they had a veto-proof number. And then they were going to vote to veto it. And what happened instead is that Senate leadership and Senator Dan Foreman went and met with the governor's office, and they inserted a daycare carve-out. So they wrote a new bill. And instead of after assuring me, because I asked him specifically, I said, please do not change any language without getting my approval. And he said, I assure you I won't. And he said, I don't have to move forward, and I won't move forward if you don't want me to. So I hear nothing from him. I've given him all the language that he needed to insert that would just say specifically, just the language necessary to reassure the governor for his purported concern, which is a total fabrication. But it
was probably literally so he could save face with his dumb excuse why not to sign it.
Well, I think it was a bait and switch is what it was. Okay. So he says, this is our concern over here. And then what he does is actually, I want to exclude daycares, meaning I want private daycares, which is all daycares almost in the state of Idaho, to be able to require vaccinations for children. So even though Idaho code says that children can be exempted for any reason their parents choose, as daycares are private entities, he wanted to carve them out and say that they didn't have to honor those exemptions because they're private businesses.
So in a way, he gained some ground against medical freedom with this carve out.
He would have, but we defeated it ultimately. So what happened on Monday was at 2:00 in the afternoon, the House representative who had sponsored the bill, Rob Beiswanger, who is, just a hero, a total hero. He's one of my favorite people on the planet right now. He stood strong. Senator Foreman went and met with the governor and with Senate leadership, and they caved. Or somehow I don't know if they were duped. I don't know what happened, but basically they draft this new bill, Senate Bill 1210, which ultimately passed, but we removed the bad language. But basically they draft this new bill. Rob Beiswanger calls me and says, listen, and he texts me the new bill. And he's like, and I'm like, this is awful. No, we can't do this. We will not sacrifice our children in order to purchase our freedom. That's outrageous. I will not be part of that. That's evil. That's evil. I'm like, this is awful. I'm not doing this. And I started texting Senator Foreman, please don't do this. This is awful. You don't know what you're doing. We can't allow this to happen. We can't auction off our kids and all this stuff. And he said, we don't have to go forward. And he did anyway. He went and introduced the bill against my wishes, my express wishes. He introduced the bill in committee that afternoon.
Why?
I was literally heartbroken, Robin. I was like, oh my gosh, I'd already been so just defeated on Saturday when I find out that the governor vetoed my bill. And then I thought, well, wait a second, we can revive this. We can resurrect it because this is ridiculous. His concern is something that we can address. So we're working behind the scenes and we say we can address it and we get all the right language. And so I'm elated they're going to resurrect it. And then they insert this horrible language. And so I'm like freaking out. And then he goes and he introduces it. And I'm like, have I been betrayed? I don't know for sure. I'm not positive. And then he finally calls me that night at like 8:00 at night, 8:30 at night. And we talk and he says, listen, this is still a good bill. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not a good bill. It's sacrificing our children. I can't be part of this. I can't have my name associated with this. And he's like, no, you need to realize it's still a good bill. It's extending this to all businesses. And I went to bed so depressed, not knowing what to do. And the next morning, I get a text from Rob Beiswanger, and he says, we can do something. The House introduces their own bill, which is identical to my first bill. And it excludes a daycare carve-out. The only thing it adds is the language that reassures the governor for his fabricated concern. So it calls his bluff. And the House, on Wednesday, I think they push through they get that bill through committee on Tuesday afternoon. On Wednesday, they hear it on the whole House floor, and then they vote on it. And it makes it through the whole House. It passes the House. And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, we could do it, And then 1210, the Senate's going forward with their bill, which is terrible. And the House is telling me they will kill the Senate's bill because it's so bad. So we're triumphant again on Wednesday night because we think that our bill is going to happen. And the Senate says, we're not going to hear your bill. The good bill. We're not going to hear the bill. So Thursday morning, so we go, we're like defeated again because this is awful. Well, Thursday morning, the Senate says that they're going to push through the bill, but they're going to take the Senate bill, but they're going to take out the daycare language. But we don't know for sure if they're going to do it. And we don't trust Senator Foreman because he'd already turned his back on us, right? He double-crossed us. Mm-hmm. And so we were telling everybody, all of our followers, kill the Senate bill, support the House bill, because that's the good bill that we know is good. And I was literally on the phone, my call dropping, driving through the mountains of Idaho in the afternoon on Thursday, driving home from the Capitol with my husband, having to pull over, like talking to House leadership. And they're like, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to kill it? Do you want us to go forward? And I'm like, I don't know. It was just so much pressure. Then I'm on the phone for 6 hours on Thursday night. And we're debating all things. So there was this other weird thing that happened, Robin, which is that this session, they brought a bunch of what are called rules from the administrative agencies into code. So the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare is allowed to issue regulations, rules, which are supposed to comply with the statute, with the code. And the problem is that when they're under the administrative agencies, then the public can't touch them or really even complain about them. And they don't always comply with the statute. And so the director of the Health and Welfare Department said, I want to get this stuff into code where the legislators can fix it. They brought all of this stuff into code this session. We couldn't read it all, and we couldn't keep up with it all. We didn't know what was going on. The new language that they had drafted referred to some of the rules that had been brought into code. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But what happened was their new bill 1210 referred to this new code that said that students could be excluded whenever there was a disease outbreak. Unvaccinated kids could be excluded whenever there's a disease outbreak, but it didn't define what disease was, and it didn't define what outbreak was. So I'm panicking. Do we agree to this or not? Because they could exclude someone who's healthy and unvaccinated when another child has pink eye. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
A cold.
Yeah, too vague. They're going back to definitional stuff, basic stuff, and it's like renegotiating the whole thing.
And a huge stick, because all the kids who are in daycares so that their parents can work would be excluded every time someone else was sick.
Yeah.
So this is just terrible. And so we were just praying and trying to figure out what to do about it and sitting on it. And I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep this entire time. 10 days, I didn't sleep. I wake up Friday morning and I'm like, okay, I'm going to support it, but I'm going to go and I'm going to say that the bill needs to be changed today because it's deeply flawed because of these issues. And then my two partners in crime, Misty Karlfeld and Sarah Clendenin, who are the executive directors of Health Freedom Idaho, and I'm on the board of Health Freedom Idaho, who've been down at the Capitol in Boise for the last 10 years, educating and standing strong on all of these issues. We were just, what do we do? We were just so crestfallen because we didn't really know what to do at this point. And I texted the assistant majority leader, Josh Tanner, and said, can I have 2 minutes of your time? And he called me and he said, listen, this isn't over. And I'm like, it's not? He's like, no, this isn't over. He said, they put in what they want. You tell us what we want, what you want. And so I'm like, there's all this language that's so vague. It's going to exclude all these kids and all this stuff. So they put in 2 unbelievable sections. One says that healthy unvaccinated individuals cannot be excluded in the event of a disease outbreak. Solved our whole problem. And second, they put in that this code cannot be contradicted by any new rules, regulations, or statute promulgated by any state agency. So even if the governor in the future declares an emergency, nothing can be enacted by any state agency. So we are to have a better bill. And because of the fact that we called the governor's bluff and the House basically pushed back, we were able to force this through on Friday, and he signed it. The governor signed it Friday afternoon as his last act of the 2025 session. It's literally the last bill he signed.
Well, that is absolutely amazing. And it's a story that everybody should be aware of what's involved in getting a bill through and do it anyway, because there aren't enough Leslie Manookians in the US. But it's such a powerful story of what a few good people can do. I almost said 3 good women, but I think it was kind of like you as the driver. You had some great supports. Sounds like some turncoat behavior, but I mean, I've seen this over and over again. And when I first started getting involved with legislation, I was very frustrated with how we would end up with breadcrumbs at the end. And everybody else was like, well, that's okay because we're improving our relationships with the legislators and we'll try again next year. And I was like, what? So, but the system is a gauntlet and it is difficult. Okay, just for comic relief.
And Robin, let me just say, you're totally right. It usually doesn't work in our favor. This time, because of COVID, I know that there are legislators in Boise who have family members who've been injured. They know, and so they are on our side this time in a way that's never been before. And usually those things that come down to the last minute, that horse trading doesn't go in our favor. This time it did because of the bravery and the unbelievable strategy of the people in the House. We had the Speaker of the House on our side. We did.
So you had good timing from what we've all been through the last 5 years, and I'm sure a lot of people who voted for your bill wouldn't have in 2020 and 2021. Like they had to actually see it play out. It had to be personal for them. Am I wrong? Or in 2020, would your governor do some crazy mandate thing and then leave town and your lieutenant governor would undo it while he was out of town? And then Brad Little had to run back to Idaho and reimpose the mandate. Like, didn't that happen like twice in 2020?
Yeah, she actually banned mask mandates. Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan, she was acting governor for a day or for like 24 hours or something, or 2 days. And she banned mask mandates while he was out of state when she was acting governor. And then he came back and overturned it, just to show you where he really stood.
Yeah. Oh, it was clear. You had very similar problems going on. I feel like Utah and Idaho are like sister states. Just such a similar demographic and such similar governors, the whole rhino thing. And so anyway, we over in Utah were laughing at your governor and cheering for you. Yeah. And you know what? I went to Idaho to see my grandmother in July of 2020. She had fallen and broken her hip in a care facility in Coeur d'Alene, and they did not let me see her. After I drove 13 hours to get there, and I never did get to see her. And then we drove all the way home and she died a week later. So did not get to say goodbye to my grandmother in Idaho. So lots of Idaho connections here.
Can I just say one thing that's happened that's been so encouraging to me, and this is what people really need to know about. Elections really matter. In the last legislative election, the last cycle, not legislative, the last election cycle, so in 2024, we picked up 8 Liberty seats in the Senate and a bunch in the House. And now the Liberty component of the legislature in both chambers is almost in control. We're within a seat or 2 of controlling both chambers of the Idaho legislature. And this is so important because those people voted with us. And if you look at what's happened in Idaho in the last 6 or 7 years, 80% of the people, so 4-to-1 people who are moving here for the freedom. They're moving here for the great laws. And so what's happened is, and they are engaged, they are aware, they are fleeing the lunacy in California, Washington, Oregon, DC, New York. They want freedom. They want autonomy. They want liberty for their families, their children, for their parental rights. And so they're coming here for that. And it's really quite encouraging because you're seeing that now in our elections, and they're there now inside on our side. And that's why it matters so much. So I really encourage people, run for election. You can make a difference. You really can.
Yeah. And I think that's what to take from your whole story is that if you want to run for election, you'll probably get in if you're a freedom candidate. And you can also write a bill. A regular person. I mean, Leslie's not average. She has an MBA and she is a powerhouse, but you're just an Idahoan and you cared enough to write a bill and it got through, and by sheer force of determination and will. So we're all really grateful for you. How can anybody who in your state wants a bill like this, where can someone reach you or reach your organization or see your bill and grab it and do something like it in our states?
So let me just say that the other thing is that you just have to believe. And I never doubted. I just believed when everyone's, it'll never happen. I just don't think that way. I didn't think that way when we filed the lawsuit against the CDC and Biden over the mask mandate. I was like, we're going to win. We're right. And the thing is, if you think about it, who can argue against you making your own medical choices, right? I mean, that's just such a basic and fundamental human right. Someone steals your car, they take your house, they take all your property, everything, your clothes. What do you have left? What's your only piece of property left? Yep. Your body. And they think that that's not the most fundamental and basic property right that you have. And our Declaration of Independence is very clear. We have the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. So, I mean, to me, it makes common sense. And when you frame it that way, I think it helps other people to see it as well as common sense. So that's one thing. So this has all been a whirlwind of, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of literally no sleep and just insane, constantly on tenterhooks. But what we're doing now, our team is making a model bill out of the bill. Okay. We're going to create a packet of information that helps all, people on the grassroots in individual states. You'll be able to find it on the Health Freedom Defense Fund website, which is healthfreedomdefense.org, healthfreedomdefense.org. It's going to be, I think, under the resources tab, and there's going to be a packet of information with the model bill and the things that you can do to start helping do this in your state. It's not quite ready yet, so give me a week or 2 weeks, and then it will be up, but it's going to be up there. And if you ever have any questions or problems, just email us at info@healthfreedomdefense.org, and then we will get back to you. But we are basically putting together a whole plan, and we are probably going to team up with a 501c4 because we're a C3 and we can only do 10% of our work can be lobbying. And so we're probably going to team up and we're going to start rolling this out across the nation in other states so that you can do it.
Okay. Well, this won't even air until next Wednesday. And so by then you'll be within days of having it up. But healthfreedomdefense.org. Our legislative session is still going. I don't know if there's any legislators here in Florida who can still sponsor a bill, but I'd like to look at it. We have 10 health freedom bills in front of the Florida legislature right now, because like you said, it's great timing. They're of a mind to pass these bills, and so we need to take advantage of it. So I'd love to be part of it here in Florida. So I can tell you want to say something to wrap up.
I just want to say, and you have a great governor who wants this stuff. Governor DeSantis was actually here. This is one reason why I thought Little wouldn't veto it. Ron DeSantis.
He was there.
He was here on the Monday morning that Little got the bill on his desk. He was here and he addressed the legislature, and he had Governor Little sitting to his right. And he said, "Oh yeah, I want to congratulate Idaho for all the wonderful things it's doing. I hear you guys have just passed a great medical freedom bill." And the governor sort of sat there quietly. And
it's like we didn't.
And then our attorney general came out in favor of it more than once on social media. And we thought we had it. And he kind of went missing for a few days. Like there was something else going on. And I'll just tell you also, there's there's definitely an agenda for New Horizons Daycare, which is the largest daycare operator in the nation and the largest in Idaho, is trying to do this in other states, and they achieved the carve out in Minnesota. So that's what was going on. And there's a case in front of the Idaho Supreme Court that will be heard on May 5th. And so if they could have gotten this inserted, it would have driven the court in the favor of the daycares rather than the parents who were pushing back.
That makes sense, because that carve out sounded so strange, but there was an agenda and a powerful entity of some big giant daycare franchise. Makes a little more sense now.
I just want to say thank you, and I just want to say people believe, and we have the wind at our back, because there are people on the inside in these legislatures that know what's gone on and they don't want to see it happen again. So you're going to have a far better reception than I've ever had in the past for these kinds of issues. Faith, a little trust, a little hard work, and we can do this.
Well, thank you so much on behalf of all of us. And let's take this and make it not just a one state Idaho thing, but let's take it all over the country. So thank you so much for your hard work, Leslie, and for sharing with us today. God bless you.
You too, Robin.
See you next time, everyone. Bye.